The Thornbury family Christmas dinner was the kind of event people in Queenstown talked about for months. My Aunt Diane had spent 3 weeks planning every detail: the hand-tied centerpieces from a florist in Arrowtown, the matching linen napkins, the seating chart that somehow always managed to place me at the far end of the table, near the kitchen. I stood just inside the front door of the Thornbury estate, still in my coat, watching through the archway as the family moved through the room like they owned the world. Which, in their estimation, they did. No one had noticed me yet. My cousin Brittany was holding court near the fireplace, laughing at something her boyfriend said, her wineglass catching the light from the chandelier. Uncle Gerald was pouring scotch for the men and pointing at something on his phone. Probably the latest valuation of the Thornbury Group's commercial property portfolio. My mother stood near the mantelpiece, adjusting a wreath that didn't need adjusting, the way she always did when she was trying to look busy and important at the same time. I heard her before she spotted me. "I did invite her," Mom said to Aunt Diane, her voice carrying just enough to reach me. "She said she'd try to make it, but you know how she is. Always working. Always some excuse." Aunt Diane made a sympathetic sound. "What is it she does again? Something in food?" "Catering," Mom said. And the way she said it flat, slightly embarrassed, told me everything. She manages a catering company. Small operation, corporate lunches, that sort of thing. She lowered her voice, though not enough. "It's not really going anywhere, between us." I unbuttons my coat slowly. If only she knew that the small catering company she was describing had quietly become something else entirely over the past 4 years. Something with a name that appeared on the side of vans all over Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch. Something that had just completed its acquisition of 3 of the most prestigious event venues in the South Island, including the one currently booked for the Thornbury Group's annual gala in February. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from my business partner, Renata. Settlement confirmed. Wanaka Lodge, Arrowtown Estate, and the Queenstown Pavilion, all 3. Documents signed an hour ago. "Welcome to the South Island, boss." I looked up at the room. In exactly 2 months, my family's most important social event of the year would be held at a venue I now owned. I stepped through the archway. Brittany saw me first. Her smile stayed in place, but shifted slightly, the way it always did. Polite, slightly condescending, like she was making an effort. "Oh, you made it. Mum said you might not come." "I almost didn't," I said honestly. "My name is Sophie Railton. I'm 29 years old, and I grew up in this family being told, in ways both direct and subtle, that I had chosen the wrong path. My father's family, the Thornburys, on my mother's side, had built their reputation on commercial real estate. Everyone in the family either worked in property, married into property, or was gently encouraged to reconsider their choices. I had, at 22, announced that I wanted to work in hospitality. The reaction had been almost uniform. A kind of polite, patient disappointment. Like I'd said I wanted to be a mime artist. "There's no future in food," Uncle Gerald told me at the time, in the same tone he might use to explain to someone that the earth was round. "You'll spend your 20s on your feet, and your 30s wondering where the money went." I had nodded and smiled and gone to work anyway. The first 3 years were exactly as hard as he'd predicted, and nothing like he'd imagined. I started doing weekend catering work for a company in Auckland while finishing my business degree at night. I saved every dollar I didn't spend on rent. I learned the industry from the kitchen floor up, how food costs worked, how staffing models worked, how venue contracts worked, and most importantly, how badly most catering companies were managed. By the time I was 25, I had enough saved and enough knowledge to start my own operation. I called it Canopy. We did corporate events, product launches, weddings. We were meticulous about quality and ruthless about costs. We grew faster than I expected. By the time I was 27, Canopy was catering for some of the largest corporate clients in Auckland. We had a team of 40. We had contracts worth more than most of my family's individual property deals. I told none of them. Not because I was planning a dramatic reveal. Honestly, I had just stopped explaining myself. Every Christmas, every family dinner, every politely loaded question, "How's the catering going? Still doing the lunches?" I had learned to answer vaguely and change the subject. It was easier. They had already decided what I was, and no amount of explaining would change that until something undeniable sat in front of them. That something was currently sitting in my phone, in the form of a settlement document. Sophie. Mum came over, kissed my cheek, looked me up and down the way she always did. You look tired. Long week, I said. You work too hard for what it is, she said, not unkindly. You should think about what Gerald said. The property business is always looking for good people. You're smart enough. You just chose a difficult industry. I know, I said. Brittany just got promoted, she added. She's heading up the residential division now, 26 and already leading a team. She said it without looking at me, which somehow made it worse. Not a jab, just a fact. Just the world as she understood it. I poured myself a glass of water and watched the room. Dinner was the same as it had been for the last several years. Gerald talked about land values. Brittany talked about her promotion. Mum talked about the garden. My cousin Marcus, who had recently joined the Thornbury group as a junior developer, talked about a deal he'd been part of that had supposedly made the front page of the NZ Herald property section. Everyone nodded and smiled and passed the potatoes. When conversation turned to me, it lasted about 4 minutes. Sophie, how's everything with you? Good. Still doing the catering? Still doing the catering. Good on you for sticking with it, Gerald said, in the tone of someone complimenting a child for finishing their vegetables. Hospitality's a tough gig. Not much room to grow, but it keeps people employed. It does, I agreed. I left early, citing an early start. Nobody tried to talk me out of leaving. 2 months later, I was sitting in my office on the 8th floor of a building in central Auckland when my phone rang. Renata put her head around the door. It's your aunt, she said, with a look that told me she already knew why. Aunt Diane's voice on the phone was careful, measured, the kind of careful that people use when they need something from someone they have not been particularly kind to. Sophie, I'm calling about the Thornbury Group annual gala. We've held it at the Queenstown Pavilion for the last 6 years. It's very important to the family, to the business. I know, I said. I've been to a few of them. Yes, well. A pause. We've been informed that the venue has changed ownership. The new management has apparently put our booking under review. There seems to be some sort of issue with our account. Another pause, more pointed this time. I've been trying to get in contact with the new owners, but I keep being directed to someone called Renata, who says she needs to escalate the matter to the CEO. That sounds right, I said. A silence. Sophie, her voice changed slightly. Is there something you'd like to tell me? I bought the Queenstown Pavilion, I said, along with the Arrowtown Estate and the Wanaka Lodge. Settlement was 2 months ago. Canopy Hospitality Group now owns all 3 venues, along with the catering company, a staffing agency, and a culinary training academy we're launching next year. The silence on the other end of the phone was the longest I had ever heard from Aunt Diane. The catering company? She said finally. Canopy, I confirmed. We turned over just under 18 million last financial year. The venue portfolio adds significant assets on top of that. We're projecting strong growth this year with the South Island properties. 18 million, she repeated. I know Gerald always said there was no room to grow in hospitality, I said pleasantly. I think about that sometimes. Another long silence. The gala, she said. Our booking is currently under review, I said. Our venues have a conduct policy for events. It's fairly standard basic expectations around how guests treat staff, that sort of thing. I'd be happy to send it through. If the Thornbury Group can confirm they're comfortable with those standards, I'm sure we can discuss the booking. I heard her breathe in. I see. I hope you have a lovely afternoon, Aunt Diane. I ended the call and looked out the window at the Auckland skyline and felt something settle quietly in my chest. Not triumph, exactly. Something more like relief. Like a door closing on a drafty room. Renata appeared in the doorway again. How'd that go? About as expected, I said. Send the conduct policy through to her, would you? The full version. With pleasure, Renata said. The calls came over the next 3 days, one after another, like a slow wave finally arriving on shore. Mum called and said she hadn't known, which was true. She sounded shaken in a way that made me feel more tired than vindicated. Uncle Gerald called and tried to sound congratulatory, but the awkwardness underneath it was impossible to miss a man trying to recalculate something he'd already decided, finding that the numbers no longer added up. Brittany sent a text that said, "Wow, that's actually really impressive." Soph, which, from her, was practically a formal apology. Marcus, who I'd always liked a little better than the others, called and just said, "I feel like an idiot." "You weren't the worst of them," I told him. I still nodded along, he said. "That's not nothing." "No," I agreed. "It's not." The one I hadn't expected was my mother coming to Auckland. She arrived on a Tuesday afternoon without much notice, which was unusual for her. She sat in the canopy boardroom, looking out over the city while I finished a meeting, and when I came in, she was very quiet. Not the kind of quiet that was gathering itself for an argument. Just quiet. "I didn't know," she said again. "I know you didn't. Why didn't you tell us?" I sat down across from her. I had thought about how to answer this question for a long time. In the abstract, the way you rehearse conversations you're not sure will ever happen. "Because you'd already decided," I said. Not in a cruel way. I don't think it was cruel, but by the time I had something real to show, you'd all already formed a picture of me that didn't have much room in it. And I found that I didn't want to spend energy convincing people who weren't looking. I paused. It was easier to just build it. She was quiet for a moment. "We were wrong," she said. "Yes, I was wrong." That one landed differently. I looked at her, at the way she was sitting, not performing anything, just sitting there with it. Mom had never been good at apologies. This was as close as I'd seen her get. "I know," I said, more gently this time. She looked around the room. At the canopy logo on the wall, at the view, at the small framed photo on my desk that she leaned forward to look at me, and an older Maori woman, both in aprons, standing in a commercial kitchen, laughing at something off camera. "Who's that?" she asked. "Her name is Hera," I said. She ran a small catering operation out of Otautahi Christchurch. Did incredible food, but she'd never had the capital to scale it or access the corporate contracts. I came across her work about 2 years ago, and we went into partnership. She mentors our junior chefs now. Her recipes are on 3 of our corporate menus. Mum looked at the photo for a long moment. "She invested in you?" "The other way around," I said. "I invested in her. She had the talent. I had the infrastructure. It goes both ways." Mum didn't say anything, but she kept looking at the photo. The Thornbury Group Gala went ahead at the Queenstown Pavilion in February. Not because I owed them anything, but because Aunt Diane had read the conduct policy carefully and signed it without pushback, and because I believed cautiously that people were capable of understanding things they'd previously refused to see. If the situation was clear enough, the event was flawless. Our team ran it with the same precision we brought to every booking. At one point during the evening, I watched Gerald hold a door open for one of our floor staff, without thinking about it, and then look momentarily surprised at himself. And I thought, maybe it's a start. Brittany found me near the end of the night, standing by the windows, looking out at the lake. "I owe you an apology," she said. "You've been giving me one in installments for the past 2 months," I said. She almost smiled. "Fair. I think I always assumed you'd settled, that you were doing the catering thing because you couldn't think of anything better." She looked down at her glass. "I think I used that to feel better about myself." "I know," I said. "It showed. I'm sorry. I know that too." She glanced sideways at me. "Is there any chance you'd consider a meeting? Not about the venues. About a project we're developing in Queenstown. Mixed commercial and hospitality. We could use someone who actually understands the hospitality side." I looked out at the lake. "Send me the brief," I said. "I'll look at it." She nodded, and for a moment we just stood there together, watching the lights reflect on the water, which felt like its own kind of progress. A few weeks after the gala, I visited Hera in Christchurch. We sat in her kitchen, the one she'd been running out of for 15 years before we partnered, small, warm, smelling of the slow-cooked lamb that was her signature. And I told her the whole story. The Christmas dinner, the phone calls, the gala. She listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I liked best about her. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know what the difference is between your family and a good kitchen? Tell me." "In a good kitchen, everyone knows what everyone else contributes. The person washing the pots knows they're as important as the person plating the dish. The whole thing falls apart otherwise. She pushed a cup of tea toward me. Your family never ran a kitchen. They only ever sat at the table. I thought about that for a long time on the drive home. The industry response to Canopy's South Island expansion was more than I had anticipated. A profile in the NZ Herald. An invitation to speak at a hospitality summit in Wellington. A call from a private equity group in Sydney, who had been tracking our growth and wanted to talk. I took the Sydney call. I went to the Wellington summit. I gave the speech. I talked about the thing that had driven everything, not revenge, not the desire to prove anyone wrong, though both of those had existed at various points along the way. I talked about the belief that the people who make an industry run deserve to be treated as the foundation of it, not the furniture. Every chef, every service coordinator, every person who drives the van and sets the tables and washes the linen. The work is not invisible. The people are not invisible. I had built a company on that belief, and the numbers had proven it right. Afterwards, a young woman came up to me. She looked about 20, maybe 21. She said she was studying hospitality management, and her family thought she was wasting her time. I looked at her for a moment. She had that look, the careful, contained look of someone who has heard the same doubt enough times that they've started quietly carrying it themselves. What do you love about it? I asked. She thought about it. I love when an event goes exactly right, and the guests don't even know how much work went into making it feel effortless. I love that. Then stay in it, I said, and learn everything. The food costs, the staffing models, the venue contracts. Learn how the whole thing works from the ground up. The people who told you it's a waste of time, they've been sitting at the table their whole lives. You're going to learn how to run the kitchen. She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that meant she'd needed to hear it. On the drive back to Auckland that evening, I called Marcus. He had been the most consistent of all of them, checking in every few weeks, asking genuine questions, not trying to pretend the years of nodding along hadn't happened. How was Wellington? He asked. Good, I said. Really good, actually. You sound different, he said. Different how? He thought about it. Like you stopped waiting for something. I looked out the window at the motorway, and the hills going dark in the evening light. Yeah, I said. I think maybe I did. What I have learned, and what I would say to anyone who asks, which is increasingly more people than it used to be, is this. The world is full of people who will assess your potential based on what your ambition looks like to them, from the outside, at a moment when it is still small. They are not always malicious. Often they are simply unimaginative. They have mistaken the seed for the whole tree. And because they cannot picture the tree, they assume the seed is a disappointment. You cannot spend your life trying to show those people the tree. You have to grow it. The other thing I have learned is that everyone in any industry, in any workplace, in any kitchen, in any office, deserves to move through their work with dignity. Not because it is polite, but because it is correct. The person who sets the table makes the dinner possible. The person who drives the van makes the event possible. The moment you begin to believe that the people beneath you in a hierarchy are beneath you as human beings, you have made a mistake that no amount of success will correct. Build your work on that understanding, and you will find that the people around you bring something that no salary alone can produce. Genuine investment in what you are trying to create. That is not a soft idea. It is the hardest-edged business principle I know. Canopy began in a rented kitchen in Auckland, with 4 employees, a second-hand van, and an absolute refusal to accept that there was no room to grow. Today, we have over 200 people across our group, 3 of the finest event venues in the South Island, and a culinary training program that has so far supported 47 people from the hospitality workforce into formal education and business ownership. None of them were invited to sit at the table. We built our own.